Advaita Vedanta after Shankaracharya. I will mention only the well-known figures up to the period of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. As a custom, writers have rarely given personal details about themselves in their text. Most of the dates mentioned are based upon academic research. Post-Shankaran scholars in Advaita will have to include both monastics and householders. Moreover, some householder scholars took the vows of monasticism at a later stage of their lives. It means that some scholars are known by more than one name. For example, Janardhan and later become Anandagiri. Usually an author whose last name is Mishra or Upadhyay or Dikshita is a householder, while the names of monks are indicated by Dashanami suffixes like Giri, Puri, Bharati, then Ashram, Saraswati, Tirtha, like that. In some cases, monks are known by the terms Muni, Yoti, Yogi, etc. The Sannyasin authors mostly belong to four mathas like Govardhana in Puri, Sharadapita in Varka, then Singari, Saravapita in Singari, and Jyotirmat in Padrikashram. Household scholars belong to the communities in which the sannyasins were born and from which the abodes were chosen. The name of Vachaspati Mishra, 9th century, is important among the early post-Shankaran scholars in the Advaita tradition. His commentary, named Bhamuti, on the Shankaracharya's Brahma Sutra Bhashya is very well known and has created a sub-tradition within Advaita called the Bhamuti school. Many commentaries to Bhamuti have been authored in course of time. Vachaspati Mishra is said to have written a commentary named Tattva Samiksha to Mandal Mishra's Brahma Siddhi. He is also known as a scholar who wrote important treatises in various Indian philosophical traditions, including NAVC-5, Mimamsa, Sankha, in addition to Advaita Vedanta. His erudition made him famous as Sarvotantra Satantra, a title highly respected in India. Another author from the 10th century is Prakashatman, who wrote the Vivarana to Padapadman's Panchopadika. It had many commentaries from later authors and gave birth to sub-tradition of Advaita Vedanta, namely Vivarana. Prakashatman also wrote the Nyaya Muktabali, namely the Vivarana school, commentaries from the later author. Nyaya Muktabali, a commentary on the Brahma Sutras, and Sarvagnathman, the author of Samsara Charika, is another notable 10th century author. One author named Gyanatama, who lived in 12th century, wrote the Chandrika on Sureshwara's Naishkarma Siddhi. Some of the books actually which are very important stands out. They have been translated by our monks, you will find in our publications. His full name is, that means Gyanatama's full name is Gyanatama Mishra. Gyanatama Mishra Mahapadhyay, and was a householder scholar. He might have become a sannyasin by name Sarvagnasram. Between 9th and 13th century, Shankaracharya's exposition of Advaita came under attack by rival Vedantin teachers, such as Bhaskara. His book is Veda Veda, Ramanjuja Vishishta Dvaita, then Nimbarka Dvaita Dvaita, and Anandatirtha Dvaita. There was also a resurgence of Nyaya-Vaishishka philosophy around the same time. It developed into Navvanaya school of later times. Hence, afterwards, Advaita tradition addressed issues raised by philosophers from Nyaya and rival schools of Vedanta. Earlier authors concerned were with the doctrines of Sankha, Mahayana Buddhism and Purva Mimamsa. Sri Harsha, who wrote the Khandana Khanda Khatya, is an important author in the history of Advaita Vedanta. He addressed Nyaya school and pointed out fallacies in their definitions of various concepts. This resulted in the revision of the Nyaya system. After Sriharsha's time, the formal logical system of the Nobbo school became very important. The Khandana Khanda Khatya was commented upon both by Advaitins and Nayayika. Sriharsha's work has been commented upon by many later Advaitins and also by authors in the Nyaya Vaishishika tradition. Chitsuka, a disciple of Jnanatam, wrote commentaries on the Khandana Khanda Khatya, Brahma Siddhi, Naiskarma Siddhi. His Tattva Pradipika is known as Chitsukhi. Chitsuk used the dialectic method like Nagarjuna, the Buddhist philosopher. Amulananda, a disciple of Sukha Prakash, who himself was a disciple of Chitsuka, wrote the Vedanta Kalpataru on the Bhamati and also a Panchopadika Darpana, thus forming an early link between Bhamati and Vivarana schools. Anandagiri, also known as Ananda Gnana, a disciple of Shuddhananda, is known as the author of a number of tikas on Shankara's Upanishad Bhashya. Both Shuddhananda and Anandagiri belong to the lineage of Dwaraka Mata. Anandagiri is popularly known as Tikakar. His Tarka Sangraha is a refutation of the Vaisheshika categories and is a very popular text in that tradition. Shankaracharya, Bharati Tirtha, Vidyaranya are important scholars of the 14th century. Later too wrote a number of important works including Panchadashi, Jivanmukti Viveka. Both authors were from Sringari lineage and Vidyaranya is traditionally known to be the guiding spirit behind the founders of the Vijayanagar Empire in southern India. In Panchadashi, Vidyaranya mentions Shankaracharya as another guru of his. This Shankaracharya was a disciple of Atmananda and he wrote many Dipika on the Upanishad belonging to Arthaveda. He also wrote the Atma Purana and the Bhagavad Gita Tatparya Bodhini. Vidyaranya is normally identified in modern literature with a Madhava. The Madhavya Shankaracharya is traditionally attributed to Vidyaranya. The Sarva Darshana Sangraha, which is a collection of Indian philosophical thought, presents the doctrines of the major contemporary schools of thought in a systematic fashion, with Advaita Vedanta as the ultimate truth. There are many authors from 14th and 15th centuries. The growth of Vijayanagar Empire and its subsidiary states in southern India was instrumental in preserving and propagation of contemporary religious and philosophical thoughts. The founders of Vijayanagar Empire identified closely with Advaita Vedanta and regarded the Shankaracharyas of Sringari Math as their gurus. A Brahmasutra Vritti is even attributed to one of the early Vijayanagara kings. The latter dynasties which ruled the Vijayanagara Empire were predominantly Vaishnava, but the kings encouraged and patronized teachers from all sects and faiths. All aspects of traditional Indian culture found patronage in the empire. Among the texts written in the 15th century is Vedanta Sara of Sadananda Yogindra, still enjoys great popularity. It is often used as an introductory text in the Advaita tradition. Sadananda also wrote the Vedanta Siddhanta Sangraha, Bhava Prakasha and the Gita, on the Gita and the Brahma Sutra Tatparya Prakasha. In the 16th century, Prakashananda Saraswati's Vedanta Siddhanta Muktavali and such other books represent a move away from the influential Bhamati and Vivarana sub-schools. They argue for the Drishti Srishti Vada. Prakashananda also wrote a few words in the Shakta tradition. It is said that the worship of Saguna Brahman in the form of goddess has been intimately connected with the Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta tradition since ancient times. Sri Vidya tradition in particular has been largely assimilated into Advaita communities, especially in southern India. In philosophy, the Vivarana school, the Vivarana sub-school continued to be very important as represented by Nrsimhasram, disciple of Jagannathasram, who was an extremely influential teacher in the 16th century. His Vedadhikara is a debate between Dvaita and Advaita philosophers. He also wrote Advaita Dipika, Tattva Vivek, Vedanta Ratna Kosha, a commentary on Padmapada's Panchapadika, Tattvabodhini, on Sarvajnanatman, and Samshep Shariraka and Bhavprakashika on Prakashatmanas Vivarana. He and his disciples, Narayanashram, Ramasram, and others flourished in the south and wrote many texts. One of the most famous disciples, Nrsimha Sharma, was Dharmaraja Adharindra, whose Vedanta Paribhasha is immensely popular. All these authors of the Vivarana school pay a lot of attention to epistemological issues, and Dharmaraja systematizes the Pramanas in Purvamimamsa and Advaita Vedanta. In the 16th and 17th centuries, a number of South Indian scholars, South Indian household scholars named Dikshita rose to prominence in the Advaita tradition. Chief among them was Appaya Dikshita, whose most famous work was the Siddhanta Lesha Sangraha. Appaya Dikshita points out that the differences between the Vivarana and Bhamati schools are not because of philosophical disagreement on fundamental principles, but a result of differing technique and emphasis on different issues such as epistemology and ontology. In the other, like Vachaspati Mishra, Appaya Dikshita has also written many texts on NAVC-5, Purvamimamsa and other schools. Many descendants of Advaita Vedanta were great scholars and authors in various fields of traditional learning well into recent times. Narasimha Bharati, who was an Acharya in the Sringeri line and a contemporary of Advaita Vedanta, wrote a commentary on Shiva Gita. Meanwhile, Advaitis and Shaivas found commonness in various social, religious and political issues, and this is reflected in Appaya's works. This influenced religious customs of most traditional Advaitins. Advaitins worship Shiva and Vishnu as representative of Saguna Brahman. However, Appaya Dikshita was liberal-minded. He composed a commentary on Yadavad Bhudaya, a work of Vedanta Deshika, a Vaishnava leader. The openness of the followers of Shankara is observed from customs and texts dating from this period. Bhattaji Dikshit, the great grammarian scholar from the north, was a disciple of Appaya Dikshit. Bhattaji's brother, Rangaji Bhatta, wrote a Advaita work such as Advaita Chintamani. Rangaji's grandson, Lakshmi Nrsimha, wrote the well-known Abhoga commentary in the Bhamati line. Madhusudan Saraswati, disciple of Vishesha Saraswati and Madhava Saraswati, is the most celebrated name in the annals of the great Dvaita-Advaita debate. He also flourished in the 16th century. His Advaita Siddhi is a classic work, and most Advaita teachers maintain that all the logical issues raised by Dvaita school of Ananda Tirtha have been more than sufficiently answered by Madhusudana. His Gurartha Dipika on the Bhagavad Gita is another well-known treatise. In addition, he wrote the Ishwar Prapti Prakash Vedanta Kalpaladika Sarsamraho on Sarvajnana's Samset Shariraka, and the justly famous Siddhanta Bindu of Shankaracharya's Dasasloki. Madhusudan Saraswati was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, just like Appaya Dikshita, who integrated Shaivadvaita in Advaita Vedanta. Madhusudan preached the Sattva school of Pancharatra Vaishnava and Advaita Vedanta philosophy. It is also interesting to note that Madhusudana boldly differs from Shankara in some of his interpretations of the Brahma Sutras and the Gita, although he salutes Shankara and Sureshwara in the most reverential terms. Madhusudan Saraswati had been a contemporary of Mughal Emperor Akbar. It is said that on Akbar's suggestion, Madhusudan initiated large numbers of sannyasis from Kshatriya and Vaishya communities to the Dakshinami orders in order to form a group of martially trained ascetics to protect the people. Armed Naga Sannyasin warriors tracing their origins to Madhusudan Saraswati and affiliated with the Dakshinami Akhras were attached to every Rajput army in northern India. It is said that Vitthalesh, the son of Vallabhacharya of the school of Suddha Advaita Pushtimarga, studied under Madhusudan Saraswati and formed link between Advaita Vedanta and Vaishnava sects in North India. In the 18th century, Sadasiv Brahmendra and Upanishad Brahmendra were very important teachers in southern India. Sadasiv Brahmendra was a disciple of Param Shivendra Saraswati, who wrote Shiva Gita Vyakha and Daharavidya Prakashika, and disciple of Abhinava Narayandra Saraswati, who wrote many Upanishad Dipikas. Sadasiva wrote Atma Vidya Vilasa, Advaita Rasamanjari and such other works. Many legends are reported about his saintliness. His simple kirtanas teach Advaita values to even the most uneducated person and are very popular in Carnatic music. The sannyasis in Sadasiva Brahmendra's lineage lived and taught in the south of India and were well known. Ramchandra Saraswati, disciple of Vasudevandra Saraswati, was popularly called Upanishad Brahmendra. He wrote in Advaita tradition commentaries on all 108 Upanishads, which are listed in the Muktipanishad. His commentaries are authoritative and are popular among the sannyasin communities in the south. In the tradition of Samana used in Brahma Sutras, he harmonized various doctrines and religious which are consistent with philosophical works of Shankaracharya. Upanishad Brahmendra lived and taught in Kanchipuram and established his motto at Kanchi. Tyagaraja, the great composer in the Carnatic music, was a disciple of Upanishad Brahmendra. In 20th century, there has been an enormous amount of activity in terms of publishing manuscripts, translating words of Advaita scholars and writing commentaries in English and in different Indian languages. They have contributed towards bringing awareness of Advaita philosophy in the West and also to the people of India. Number of scholars are numerous. Some have composed philosophical texts in Sanskrit. Of the authors is Chandrasekhar Bharati, the recent ones of Sringeri. He who wrote the Vivek Chudamani Bhasya. This commentary was begun by his guru, Sri Satchidananda Shivabhinava Nrisingha. Another important author is Sri Satchidanandendra Saraswati of the Adhyatma Prakash Karyalaya, who brought the critical thinking of modern academic scholarship to the Advaita tradition. He wrote the Brahma Vidya Rahasya Vibriti on the Chandogya Upanishad, Gita Shastra Viveka, Gita Shastrartha Viveka, Klesha Paharini and Sureshwara's Nishkarma Siddhi, in addition to many other texts in English and Kannada on the Advaita tradition. The third author is Vidyananda Giri, who wrote a Tika to Totaka's Shruti Sara Samudharana. Among the householder scholars of recent times, particular mention has to be made to Vasudev Shastri Avhankar, author of Advaitamada, N.S. Anantakrishna Shastri, who wrote Advaita Datta Sudha and other works, and Kalanguri Natesa Shastri, whose periodical Arjamata Samaradhani published many Upanishads and Bhashyas with Tamil translations, and Subramanya Shastri, whose Shankara Gurukulam school has produced many scholars. This brief study of post-Shankaran scholars in the Advaita tradition shows its basic continuity in spite of India's numerous historical upheavals. Many teachers have remained anonymous. They taught only select students and did not write commentarial texts. Great teachers and authors are found from all over India. The sannyasis travel far and wide all over India, preaching basic religious values to the masses and teaching philosophy to competent students. Despite changes in India's social, political and religious atmosphere, the great teachers influenced the lives of the post-Shankaran teachers of Advaita. The leadership of teachers of Advaita Vedanta contributed immensely to the universal nature of Hinduism and encouraged a tolerant attitude towards diverse religious practices. However, through it all, the basic dictum of Advaita Vedanta, Atman is Brahman, has always been firmly adhered to. The tradition continues to this day and will continue well in the future. Now I have to tell the story of the time because we are already tired. The story is very short and it is a real story. You know, time is very important. Time is important in this way. I used to work in Rajkot Center, and it has a very big publication section which translates all the works that are published in Bengali or English in that way. It is very big, and it is the only publication center in Gujarati. So in 70s, when I was there, I was a brahmachari at that time. One day, one gentleman came, very nicely suited and booted and very distinguished person. We perceived that he was a very distinguished person. He came and books at that time actually books and publication sections in a small, not small, but medium-sized room. So he came and said that I am coming from Bombay. And probably he gave his card. And from his card he came to know he was some Mr. Shah. His first name I forget. And he introduced himself that I am a, what is called, practitioner, tax lawyer of taxation. And I was a co-student of Nani Palkiwala. You know, Nani Palkiwala was a very well-known what is called jurist or luminary in law in Bombay. So whatever it may be. So he said that I have read one book by Swami Prapannananda, that is Mind and Its Control, and it has influenced me very much. And I want this book to be published in Gujarati, and I shall bear the expenses. Say about 2,000 copies if you publish as a first edition, I shall pay that money. So after discussions and all those things, we become a little friendly. We offered some in Rajkot they offer prasadam in a plate, offered fruits are given to distinguished guests, and in that way they offered and they become little chit chat. He said that I came today by air and I am just going back tomorrow just for this purpose only. Then he said, during the conversation, he said that time is very important, and you know, my friend Nani Palkiwala, he is very well known, but he is very generous also. He keeps a little time for free consultation. Free consultation means probably 1 hour, 2 hours or something like that of the day or week, whatever it may be. He has to give anybody who comes, he will not be charged. So what was the rule? The rule was that he will give only 3 minutes for the discussion or whatever he wants to know. So his usher, that means the secretary or whatever it may be, used to coach the persons who used to come, because some difficult problems were there, they need solution, but it may not go by within 3 minutes, it cannot happen. So he actually warned that when you enter, don't say, sir, or something, I'm very happy or what, who are you? Just say what is your problem. Just say. And time will be ticking. And if it has not finished in 3 minutes, every minute will be charged 51 rupees. And that was the thing. So time is really money, you know. And if you think in 70s, $51 per minute, if somebody charges, you can calculate what will be the amount of money per hour and what amount of money used to charge for ordinary consultations. So time is money. That is very important. Thank you very much.
Maharaj covered more than 1,000 years of history in exactly 25 minutes, demonstrating tremendous time management. You can see what a vast amount of activity has taken place in the last 1,000 years in Advaita Vedanta, in post-Shankara Advaita. But Maharaj began with reference to the monastic orders, which is very important. We did not mention that. Shankaracharya actually is responsible for the monastic orders known as the Dashnami Sampradaya, the Vedantic monastic orders. Why it is important is, here we are. We all belong to that tradition. The sannyasis here, we belong to the Puri Sampradaya, part of the 10 orders of monks traced back to Shankaracharya. Mataji there, she belongs to the Saraswati, which is also part of the 10 orders of monks traced back to Shankaracharya. So that is key, because that's why we are all gathered here today. The effect of Shankaracharya's organization, Dashnami Sampradaya. There's a funny story, a couple of stories about this. Swami Vivekananda was once asked, what kind of monk are you? Are you Puri or Giri? In Bengali, apni ki Puri na Giri. Vivekananda, typically humorous and mischievous, he said, no, I am neither. And what are you? I am a Kochuri. He said, Bengali, Hindi also, even Kachori is there. But he was very careful about maintaining the lineages, and that's why we are very clear that we belong to the Dashnami Sampradaya monks, and specifically the Puri order. I had a personal experience of this in the Himalayas when I met a Naga sannyasi, and I asked him, what is your name? He said, Purnamgiri. He's a fierce kind of man. Purnamgiri, what's your name? I said, Sarvapriyananda. He said, what? In Hindi, Puri kaha gaya? Sabji ke saath kha gaya? Where is the, you have to give the full name, Sarvapriyananda Puri. And the play on words was, where is the puri and also the bread which you eat with vegetables? What happened to the puri? Did you eat it with your vegetables? Another story which links America to this order is Mark Twain, the great humorist. He traveled across the world and he went to India also, and he met one of the great post-Shankara Advaitins at that time in late 19th century, probably it was, or early 20th, late 19th century, Swami Bhaskarananda Saraswati. And Mark Twain, in his gentle humor, he was humorous but not insulting, in a very gentle and sweet way. He says, this monk has a name longer than the longest German word you can think of. Starting with 1008 Shris, going on, Parivrajaka, Acharya, Brahmanishtha, and so on and so forth, a long name. And the monk presented him with his commentaries on the Upanishads. So he had written, Bhaskarananda Saraswati has commentaries on the Upanishads. This same monk, we must note, Ma Sharada went and met him, Swami Vivekananda met him, and some of the other direct disciples. I think Sri Ramakrishna also met him, if I'm not wrong, along with Tridanga Swami. Yes, he met Bhaskarananda Saraswati. So Bhaskarananda Saraswati presented the important American visitor with his Sanskrit commentaries on the Upanishads. And Mark Twain, not to be outdone, immediately presented him with Huckleberry Finn. And he writes, quite sweetly and affectionately, when the monk tires of his meditations on the Absolute, I am of the opinion that Huckleberry Finn may provide him with some hours of amusement and comfort. At the very least, it will do him no harm. Now, a couple of other remarks on post-Shankaradvaitins as a bridge to the next speaker and the topic of women in Vedanta. There sometimes the presence of women is on the sidelines. You see in some anecdotes somewhere, most of the works are attributed to men. And you see the lineages, they're all men. And yet there is the presence of women in interesting ways. Maharaj mentioned, he started his talk with Vachaspati Mishra, who is one of the greatest scholars and voluminous writer on various systems, not just Advaita Vedanta. As Maharaj mentioned, he has the title Sarvatantra Swatantra Acharya, the master who has independent movement, mastery across various philosophies, all philosophies. Now, the story goes, this is all word of mouth among Pandits. The story goes, when Vachaspati Mishra was married, it seems in those days, during a marriage also part of the ceremony would be debates on philosophy. I think they have done away with it in modern Indian marriages. It's mostly Bollywood and dancing now. But I think we have lost something there. So there was a debate on philosophy, on Vedanta. And Vachaspati Mishra couldn't believe what he was hearing. This is all wrong. But he couldn't say anything because he was the guru. So he was fuming, sitting there. He said, waiting for this stuff to be over so that I will write a book so that nobody will make such mistakes afterwards. I will explain Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. So immediately after marriage, he got down to it. With all vigor and concentration, and day in and day out, he would write his commentary. One day, suddenly in the evening, it's getting dark, and he sees this lady come into his room and light a lamp and put it in front of him, and quietly leaving the room. And he says, stop, who are you? Why are you here? And why did you light this lamp? Why did you come into my room this evening, late evening? She says with tears in her eyes, I'm your wife. And this is the first time you have spoken to me in all the years of our marriage. And all the time you have been writing that book. And so Vachaspati Mishra was so touched, the story goes, he said, what's your name? That's not so surprising, even till recent, the era of arranged marriages is almost over, but at that time, what's your name might have been a good question to ask after marriage. So, what's your name? And she says, Bhavati. And he says, that as long as people shall talk about Advaita Vedanta, study Advaita Vedanta, as long as it will live in this world, your name will always be there. They will talk about it. He named that book Bhavati. And see, today, in the 21st century, in Huntsville, Alabama, in the Von Braun Center, we're talking about her. We're taking her name. And he says, forever, your name will be there. Another story, coming much closer to our time, Dharmaraja Advarindra, Maharaj mentioned. It's a book that we have all studied, Vedanta Paribhasha. It's a manual, introductory, but it's a little difficult, but introductory manual on Advaita Vedanta. But there are some peculiarities about this book. One is, there is an influence of Mimamsa philosophy, and Nyaya also, which is not strictly Advaita doctrine. Some critics say that, and there is a story behind this. The story is, Dharmaraja Dwarindra was a Mimamsa scholar, Purva Mimamsa scholar. He had nothing really to do with Advaita Vedanta. He was a master of it, but it was not his main subject. His wife was a non-dualist, Advaita Vedanta, and clearly she was a tough woman. She said, you better write a non-dualist book on Advaita Vedanta, and forced him to, and that's the book he's really known by today. This is the book he wrote. And so as an act of husbandly rebellion, he quietly sneaked in some Mimamsa into that book. Anyway, there are so many such stories. The presence of women in Advaita Vedanta and Vedantic traditions, this is an important subject, and our next speaker will tell us more about it. This is Brahmacharini Jyoti Chaitanya Ji. She is the resident monastic at the Chinmaya Center in Atlanta.